morning, this is TVP World. You're watching World News. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and these are the latest headlines. U.S. President Donald Trump says his 28-point Ukraine peace proposal is not the final offer, as Western leaders work to respond ahead of emergency crisis talks in Geneva on Sunday. Meeting on the sidelines of the G20 summit in South Africa, European leaders warned that the plan needs major changes before it can serve as a basis for ending Russia's war. Trump confirmed on Saturday that Ukraine has until Thursday to respond to the U.S. proposal, though he signaled that an extension is possible. The plan, announced on Friday, resembles long-standing Kremlin demands and would require Ukraine to cede territory and limit its military capabilities. At the G20 summit, European leaders, including Emmanuel Macron, Germany's Friedrich Merz, and the UK's Keir Starmer, said the draft needs additional work, stressing that any agreement must provide real security for Ukraine and for Europe. With Washington reportedly boycotting parts of the G20 agenda and tensions rising over the process, leaders say they're remaining far from reaching the final agreement. As questions roll over who is driving the reported 28-point peace blueprint for Ukraine, America's top diplomat has moved to cut through the confusion. Marco Rubio says the proposal did originate in Washington, building on Russia's input while also incorporating what he calls ongoing contributions from Kyiv.
The peace proposal was authored by the US and it is offered as a strong framework for ongoing negotiations. It is based on input from Russian side, but it is also based on previous and ongoing input from Ukraine.
Air traffic at Dutch Eindhoven Airport in the south of the country was halted for several hours on Saturday evening after multiple drone sightings. Dutch Defense Minister Ruben Belkomans wrote on X that the police and National Gendarmerie were on site investigating the incident. 2 hours after the first disruption, air traffic resumed. The defense minister called the use of drones to disrupt flights unacceptable, adding that action must be taken against it. The Ministry of Defense has taken measures, though Brekelmans said that they are not yet able to share details for security reasons. On Friday, the Dutch military used weapons against drones seen above the Valkuil Air Force Base northeast of Eindhoven. As the U.S. ceasefire proposal for Russia and Ukraine gains global attention, leaders from Europe and Ukraine have pledged to revise Donald Trump's 28-point document. Speaking to TVP World, former Slovakian Defense Minister Martin Sklenár said the points most likely to face challenges are those involving territorial concessions and amnesty for war criminals.
There are several things that need to be redrafted or reconsidered in the plan. Certainly from a European point of view, from a Ukrainian point of view, the most obvious ones are the territories and their management after the plan, the security guarantees or the security limitations that Ukraine will need to fulfill once this plan potentially goes into implementation. Then there's the issue of possible prosecution of crimes that happened in the full-scale invasion and in the war in Ukraine. There's a lot that needs to be discussed. Certainly, each and every of the stipulations of the plan really deserves a second look from what we have seen so far.
The leaders of the 8 Nordic and Baltic countries pledged continued support for Ukraine on Saturday as the country faces pressure to sign the U.S. proposed peace deal. The declaration comes as Ukraine and European allies work to coordinate a response to the 28-point plan to end the war presented by the U.S. this week. In a statement released after a call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, the country said Ukraine has continuously shut down it is serious about continued showing that it is serious about peace and commended Zelensky for his efforts. The leaders say they support solutions that respect Ukraine's sovereignty and will bring Ukraine and Europe great security and stability. They added that Ukraine remains ready to negotiate and, as stated by President Zelensky, is working on the document prepared by the U.S. You can find more on our website, tvpworld.com. French President Emmanuel Macron said there is one aggressor and one victim as he addressed the G20 summit on Saturday. He pointed to Russia as the main obstacle to long-lasting peace and the main reason behind the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine.
Now we just have one problem, and our problem is not the US on this negotiation at this point. Our unique problem, all of us, is Russia, which started this war. We refused to take the ceasefire proposals in February, March, July, August, etc., and didn't provide any guidance if they are okay just to have a ceasefire now. And look at the humanitarian situation in Ukraine, not just in the east, but everywhere. Look at the situation of the infrastructure of energy and so on. Look at the civilian casualties. I mean, this is a necessity to stop the Russians. There is one aggressor and one victim.
Polish Minister of Internal Affairs and Administration, Marcin Kierwiński, said Poland expects Ukraine's intelligence services to ensure that a failure to inform their Polish counterparts about a wanted person outside Ukraine's border will, quote, not happen again. His comment follows a foiled sabotage plot in Poland carried out by a Ukrainian national on Russian borders. Marcin Kierwiński also said Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk already spoke to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky about this issue during their latest round of talks. One of the suspects in the sabotage plot is a Ukrainian national previously sentenced in absentia by court in Lviv for preparing sabotage act on a local drone factory. Kierwiński added that if a Russia-recruited saboteur leaves a country, they should be marked with an Interpol notice. Last week, a section of railway track on Warsaw-Dorojsk line was destroyed by an explosive device planted by saboteurs on orders from Russia. The damage forced a passenger train carrying 475 people to brake rapidly to avoid a catastrophe. Polish officials called the act state-sponsored terrorism. Following an agreement between Washington and Minsk, 31 Ukrainians were released from Belarusian custody and allowed to return home. The 31 individuals who were freed had been convicted of criminal offense, according to Belarusian state broadcaster Belta. Thanks to the deal between U.S. President Donald Trump and his Belarusian counterpart Alexander Lukashenko, the prisoners received presidential pardons, were put on a bus and taken to the Ukrainian border. Lukashenko, a close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin, has freed several hundred prisoners since mid-2024 as he seeks to mend relations with the West after years of sanctions over his human rights record and backing for Russia's war in Ukraine. President Trump this month named a special envoy to Belarus and tasked him with negotiating further releases. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky and First Lady Olena Zelenska commemorated the victims of the Great Famine at the Holodomor Victims Memorial in Kyiv on Saturday. The memorial honors the tragedy of the Soviet-orchestrated famine that devastated Ukraine in the 1930s.
The President and the First Lady attended a commemorative prayer service with officials and military personnel. Holodomor Memorial Day is observed annually on the fourth Saturday of November. It is estimated that the famine took as many as 10 million Ukrainian lives between the years 1932 and 1933. Poland, the European Union and the United States recognized the Holodomor as a genocide perpetrated by Soviet authorities against the Ukrainian nation.
The White House is reportedly weighing a new step in its pressure campaign against Nicolas Maduro, using U.S. military aircraft to drop leaflets over Caracas that advertise a $50 million reward for information leading to the Venezuelan leader's arrest. U.S. officials told the Washington Post the psychological operation has not yet been authorized.
According to the newspaper, the proposed leaflet drop will coincide with Maduro's 63rd birthday on Sunday. It is a part of Washington's escalating strategy against his government. The Biden and Trump administrations have repeatedly increased the bounty for Maduro, which now stands at $50 million for information leading to his arrest or conviction. Reuters reports that the US is planning additional covert operations as President Trump escalates his fight against what he calls narco-terrorists tied to Caracas. Since September, US forces have carried out strikes on suspected drug-carrying vessels in the Caribbean and Pacific, killing at least 80 people. The Pentagon has also deployed the aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford and other warships to the region. Meanwhile, Bloomberg reports that a sanctioned Russian tanker part of Moscow's shadow fleet, turned back twice from Venezuelan waters after crossing paths with the USS Stockdale, highlighting the rising tensions in the Caribbean.
It has been a year since students joined protests against Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić's government. The demonstrations were sparked by the Novi Sad railway canopy collapse, which killed 16 people.
The student protests are part of a larger opposition movement against Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić and his government, which failed to prosecute those largely seen as responsible for the faulty canopy construction.
I'm here because today we mark 1 year since Vučić's thugs came here to beat up the students at the Faculty of Dramatic Arts. The entire event that took place on this day a year ago is simply where everything started, the biggest movement in the history of our country. My biggest hope for this particular protest is that once again people's awareness will be raised. I wish for people to start joining us along the way and that we'll raise some awareness again, shake the people up a little.
The ruling Serbian Progressive Party has been in power for too long. For too long they have been spreading their tentacles throughout all structures of the system. Things really have changed in Serbia. I will be here no matter what, even if the authorities prevent me from doing so. And the same goes for all the people who are gathering here.
Diana Haka, the mother of one of the victims of the rail station's collapse, went on a hunger strike for 16 days, which ended recently. She has become a motivating force behind the protests.
People wrote to me sending their blessings, showing support for my health. I'm going to stay here, no matter what.
During President Aleksandar Vučić's 13 years in power, the Serbian police clamped down on many demonstrations throughout the country using stun grenades and tear gas. The violent suppressions of the protests by the authorities was wildly criticized by the European Union, as the use of excessive force puts the future of the country and its EU candidacy into question.
The first Polish military satellite still awaits its launch into Earth's orbit, but its full-scale model can now be viewed at an exhibition in Warsaw. Sonia Agatabishan reports on the ICE Space Reconnaissance Project.
Poland is about to launch its first military satellite in a matter of days, and those that wish to see its full-scale model and more may want to visit the Vigilance from the Orbit exhibition at the Polish Army Museum in Warsaw.
Our visitors can actually see the history of satellite missions, can actually understand why people need satellites, and multiple kinds of imagery that we are actually taking as ICE and how those can be employed.
Synthetic aperture radar satellites, such as the one that will be deployed by the Polish Armed Forces, offer unique capabilities compared to optical satellites.
Earth observation satellites, electro-optical satellites need light. They need light so they cannot image at night and they cannot image through clouds. Radar satellites can image through clouds and during the night because they are completely different technology.
The full-scale model of the satellite that is expected to boost Poland's security and defense capabilities can be seen at the exhibition until the end of the weekend. From Warsaw, for TVP World, I'm Sonia Agatabishchan.
And with that, we conclude this edition of World News. But for more news, update and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.